Good morning. Hi, everyone online in the cyberspaces of the world. My name is Rick Vanover, and we are live here at VeeamOn 2014, and we are going to give a quick tech talk on which way to install Hyper-V. This is a topic that I have written a couple blog posts about over at backupacademy.com and a couple other places, but it's one of those things that actually I think takes a little bit of thought. You know, a lot of people are new to Hyper-V, and when it comes to getting started with that hypervisor, how's the best way to do it? Now, in particular with Hyper-V, there are three ways to install it, or three ways that it can exist in the server class. And when I say a server class, I'm going to exclude the option you have with Windows 8 and 8.1 to run Hyper-V on a Windows 8 class of system. So when it comes to a server class Hyper-V installation, there are three core options that we're going to talk about right now. It's a short and sweet look into this, but my thought was I want to make sure that the catch points, the pros and the cons are each identified so that if you're thinking about how to install Hyper-V, my insight here might be able to help you. So let's jump into it. So, high level, there are three options on installing Hyper-V. The first one is the free Hyper-V. Okay, when I say free Hyper-V, let me be real specific. Hyper-V Server 2012. Now, the latest one is Server 2012 R2. There also is Server 2012 base, so Hyper-V Server 2012. And there also was Hyper-V Server 2008 R2. Hard to keep these numbers, and then if not, they have the R2. Hard to keep that all straight. So Hyper-V Server 2012 R2 is a hypervisor only. And if you're familiar with the way Windows Server works, think of Windows Server Core with one role only eligible to be used, and that's the Hyper-V role. However, it is installed already. So if you drop in the ISO for Hyper-V Server, the Hyper-V role will be in there. Now, it looks just like this on the screen. It's pretty boring. However, there's this thing called sconfig. Sconfig is a menu of 14 key options. I don't know about you, but I'm really not too good at PowerShell. Dave Kawula here, Hyper-V MVP, he can run circles around me with PowerShell. But basically, when it comes to running the server ongoing, you'll need to administer it in one of a couple of ways. For one, you can use Server Manager, which is the new Windows framework to manage systems, right? And you can manage them remotely. Now, you can do that with all editions, not just Hyper-V Server, but the Windows Server in general, you can do that. But you can also use Hyper-V Manager remotely, which is, in most situations, how you're going to use Hyper-V. You can do that with the free one. That works just fine. Things that I've found that are a little bit more difficult with the free Hyper-V server. From one, changing the name. Now this little sconfig really helps, right? You can go to option 2, drop in a name, join a domain, but then a little bit more finite things like DNS suffixes and stuff. Those are just really good for PowerShell and NetSH scripts if you're good at that. I'm not. Used to be. So I find myself making Hyper-V clean, for me, a little bit difficult when I go with the free Hyper-V. But nonetheless, free is good. And if you fancy the Linux operating systems, you can really roll out a free stack this way. It's important to note that the free Hyper-V server does not in itself provide any Windows guest licenses. I mean, you can run Windows VMs, but it doesn't provide the licenses. So a couple of cautions there. So the free Hyper-V isn't necessarily much smaller than the full Windows installation, somewhat, but on disk it is. In terms of the ISO, it's not much different. But on disk, it's a little bit lighter. But in my experience, I'm not usually strained on disk capacity. I'm usually strained on disk performance. That's just my environment. So let's take a look. Option 2. You can also install Hyper-V as a role in Windows Server Core. Now, Windows Server Core is much like the free Hyper-V server, except you can add other roles. So you could have a DNS server, you could have print services, you could do Windows Server deduplication, I believe. Maybe not. I'm not sure if that's supported on Core, but you can do other roles. But there's no local UI. Granted, you may or may not like the Metro interface. It's not there in core. Now, one of the good things about what I call full Windows, meaning a licensed product of Windows Server, is you can convert it from core to full UI back and forth. I've not done that myself, but I know it's a nice option. And if you fancy the notion of core with smaller footprint and less overhead, that might work. Additionally, as a support mechanism, you could convert to the full install. So if you like the idea of core, but you worry about it for supportability, this might be a good use case for Server Core as a Hyper-V host. Like the free Hyper-V server, there's no local UI. So everything's going to have to be done through Hyper-V Manager, through Server Manager, PowerShell, and the like. But it's important to note you can run other roles on that. Now, this is where I do most of my work with Hyper-V, and I install it as a role in a Windows Server full installation. I'm at home here, right? I have my start menu, I have my server manager. I can still do the remote stuff, so I can run a remote server manager. I can run Hyper-V Manager remotely. In fact, here at VeeamOn, we prepared a demo lab for Veeam Backup and Replication V8. And one of the things we show is feature parity for both VMware and Hyper-V environments. And when we run the Hyper-V in the lab here, I don't actually have many Hyper-V hosts, but what I do is I connect to them through Hyper-V Manager. So this is part for how I show products, but it's kind of a tip here, is that you'll have a Hyper-V infrastructure, but accessing it through Hyper-V Manager remotely, power button, console, those types of things are easy to do when you are doing it remotely. So it's an easy way to administer, right? So you got to think about the ongoing administration. So if you have Hyper-V on Windows Server full, you can do it locally, you can do it remotely, you can do it through scripting, you can put other roles on there. And this is actually what I would say is the biggest caution. This is the classic example of just because you can does not mean that you should. And what I mean by that is you can install other roles on a Hyper-V host. Is it a good idea to make the Hyper-V host a domain controller? No. Is it a good idea to put Exchange on the Hyper-V host? No. If you want to run Exchange as a Hyper-V VM, I think that's a much better approach. A lot of other things to think about, but those are the three ways. So that begs the question to what I think is best. What do I think is best? I think the full installation role of full installation of Windows with the Hyper-V role added, I think that's the best. So for supportability, one. In particular, troubleshooting. I'm no good at scripting. If you are confident in scripting, then maybe the first two options would be more efficient. I do fancy putting things through group policy, which is an automation technique, but it's not really a scripting and the like. If you've gone down the System Center Virtual Machine Manager route, that might be an option for you as well. But System Center Virtual Machine Manager can really do some centralized things, allowing you to push out policies, configurations to different elements of the Hyper-V infrastructure. So if you're going down that route, System Center may be more attractive with the core and free Hyper-V server. But for me, I'm a full install, add the role, troubleshoot as needed, and scale out that way. All right, thank you for attending this quick vBrownBag Tech Talk at VeeamOn.